Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, welcome and adab. You are listening to Bharat FM, a one-of-its-kind, multilingual, eclectic provider of entertainment, information and news to Indian Americans. Headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, Bharat FM airs shows out of Cincinnati, Chicago and Phoenix. We take pleasure in our ability to cater to your bhakti, chusti, sfurti, shakti and masti needs with our audio and visual shows. Check out bharatfm.com for our online program schedule and archives. I'm sure the content will definitely tickle your senses. Tune in via the 24-hour web streaming on bharatfm.com or via the Bharat FM app. More information can be procured at 513-488-5070.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Things We Carry. I'm your host, Varshini Satish, and today we have Miliana Singh with us. I am so excited for this conversation, and as always, a huge thank you to Sahas for Cause and Bharat FM, without whom this platform and the show would not be possible. I'm just going to take a second to introduce the woman with us today because she is incredible and has impacted so many people's lives through her work. So, Miliana Singh is the LGBTQ+ Healthcare and Transgender Services Coordinator for the OC LGBTQ Center. She's a California transplant moving from Florida, but she's no stranger to Orange County as she moved from Orange County, Florida. She's passionate about uplifting and empowering the community through outreach and building a strong sense of unity. Miliana started her transition in Polk County, Florida back in 2006 in a region that was not gender affirming and that lacked the resources for a successful transition. Despite her obstacles, she was able to become the woman she is today. And what an incredible person that is. She uses the past as a reminder of what hardship was like and fuels that into the passion she now has to better the lives of all those that she is able to affect. Miliana started at the center as a volunteer and within a year transitioned into an employee for the center. She's so excited for the positive changes to come through her work and the work of her colleagues as well. Welcome. I'm so happy and excited to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too, and I think it's going to be one that is invaluable to our audience and also for our audience members who maybe have not had the chance to hear the stories of the people within the LGBTQ plus community, because I think the South Asian community, I'm just going to start off by saying it, is not the most welcoming or affirming to individuals of that group. So I hope that, this is going to open a lot of people's minds and open up a lot of conversations within people's families as well. So the first thing I want to ask you is, and this is what we ask all of our guests, what is your or your family's history in the United States, and do you have an immigration story?
Yeah, so my family came here in the 70s, I believe. So my grandmother was the first to, my grandmother, so they're the first to immigrate to America. And so my mother's mother is from Jamaica. That's where my mother is from, side of the family. So they're Jamaican and Punjabi. And my father is Trinidadian and Gujarati. So my mother's mother came to New York, as did my father's mother. That's how my parents met. And my mom is the youngest of 4 children. My dad is the youngest boy of 4. Like, there's 4 kids, and he's like the second to youngest, but he's like the youngest out of the boys. And my dad came to this country when he was 17. And so my parents, I think my mother's a lot more Americanized than my father, I would probably say. But I just remember stories from my grandmother of like what it was like when she first came here and dealing with the cold, leaving Jamaica to come to America, having to send for the rest of the family because she was establishing herself in America for a while, having to get acclimated. So actually, I take it back. I think she came in the 60s, I want to say, because she came right around the time that MLK was assassinated. So I know right when they were changing the laws, and Kennedy and MLK were both assassinated when my grandmother was coming to America. So her favorite president was Kennedy. But we kind of know what happened there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, my grandmother, she moved here. My grandfather came after some time. It was a few years. My grandmother had to establish herself in America and then send for her husband and send for the children. And so the kids were in Jamaica without a mother for some years. And my about that.
All good.
My yeah. And so my grandfather talks about like coming to America and experiencing snow for the first time. And it being such a shock because
Yeah.
he was used to warm weather and now he's like in New York with below 0 degrees, snow and all this other stuff. And he's just like, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And I feel like the time when they came, like MLK being assassinated, Kennedy being assassinated, I feel like for many people of color, especially like Black Americans, that was the first sign of hope for so many people and for people of color in this country in general. So I feel like that time period coming in was already probably really scary because her favorite president, someone who she thought, this person is going to make my life in this country so much better, and the first signs of promise and hope. So I feel like that must have been really jarring. And also, I feel like from what I've heard, having
I'm gonna grab water real quick.
grab some water.
I had a feeling I might need water. And I was like, oh, should I grab it before we start?
I have it in a very unflattering, like literally like water.
Yeah. Mine is so beat up, like I cannot stand it straight. It just drops. So I just lay it flat.
That's how you know you use it though. And I definitely need to up my water intake. That was one of my New Year's resolutions. I have not followed through. I have an app that tracks water intake. I'm not filling it up like at the end of the day.
I'm really bad. I need to be drinking more for sure.
But yeah, what I was thinking of was the fact that your grandmother came here. I feel like that is pretty unusual. Usually in the stories that I've heard, the husband comes first or like the male in the family ends up coming first. So for your grandmother to come first and try to like stake this out on her own in a city like New York, that must have been scary, but also speaks to her like resilience and independence as well. I mean, that's extremely impressive, especially there were no phones, like there were no cell phones. There was no like easy way to communicate or even, I feel like do research or speak to someone who already lives there at that time in the 70s too.
Yeah, well, this was 60s because I think the assassination was like 64, like mid 60s. Yeah, I don't know how she did it, thinking back on her journey over here. My grandmother was just always very headstrong. She's just been always like a feisty, independent type of woman. She did whatever she wanted to.
We love.
Yeah, she was the youngest daughter. And she was just like this feisty one. She was a tomboy growing up. She loved playing softball. She loved baseball. And she was just always very independent. And so she sought out her education. She became a RN. And she was just like, I wanted a better life for myself and my family. And my grandfather stayed with the children. Then he had a business and property in Jamaica, and he was a businessman and a realtor. So he stayed with the kids, and my grandmother, she came out here and established herself. And it was really tough for, I think, my grandfather too, because the weather was just too much. He was just like, I cannot deal with this cold. Like, I hate it here, you know? And the kids adjusting to being in America. And I mean, just the time frame of like when their lives kind of were happening. My grandparents got married in 59.
Mhm.
And, you know, my grandmother is biracial. She's black and white. My grandfather's Indian. He's Punjabi.
Mhm.
And they had to overcome so many things just to like get married.
Mhm.
Um, and all of the prejudice and the issues that came from this Indian boy marrying this black girl, right?
Mhm.
And how the family was like, no, we want to arrange your marriage with another Indian girl. Like, why are you breaking tradition? Why, you know, are
Mhm.
you doing this? And my grandfather just was in love with my grandmother, and he followed his heart.
I love
And
that.
yeah,
You're like, yeah. I feel like this is a tale as old as time, and we're seeing it even today. Like, there is still so much pushback, and you're like, come on, we have to, like, from generation to generation, change and like open this up. And even now, today, we're still seeing that. Sorry, I'm gonna close my window. Um, there's a lot of like issues today. Like, we're a little all over the place, you know.
this is Mercury retrograde, I swear.
Oh my gosh, I'm feeling it until the 20th. We just got to make it past tomorrow, and then we'll be okay.
Please, 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 please. Wait, isn't it Rihanna's birthday, I think? I think today's her birthday or
Oh my
something.
God, happy birthday, Rihanna, my favorite.
Yeah, right? Because I know she's like on the cusp of like
Yeah, Aquarius.
Pisces and Aquarius. Yeah.
I'm an
Mhm.
Aquarius, so I wish I could claim her, but we have Megan Thee Stallion, so I guess, you know,
Yes,
we got
yes.
one. But yeah, and what I wanted to ask you was, you said like, you know, your family is just like a melting pot of people of different backgrounds coming from different places. Growing up, were there like principles or values that your family held on really closely to from their different backgrounds, and how was it kind of like communicated to you and into your upbringing?
Yeah. There was never really conversation. I feel like I didn't know that there was any type of difference until like maybe 10, 11.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because I grew up, I'm born and raised in New York. I didn't leave New York till I was 13.
Mhm.
So the neighborhoods I grew up in, I'm from Queens, and so
Mhm.
we just had like a melted pot of brown, black and
Mhm.
brown. You know, Jamaicans, Trinidadian, Guyanese, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Panamanians, like we all just coexisted in one space. And I mean, yeah, there was a difference because, you know, Spanish was spoken, or you have English and you have like accents, but we all were just one and the same. The schools I was going to, predominantly black and brown, like just seeing myself reflected within the education system and my living system. And I don't think it was until maybe like 10 or so when I started hearing like words like coolie,
Mhm.
and you know, they're like, oh, you're coolie, or this is coolie, this person's coolie. So I then started to learn, okay, so coolie is you have Indian blood or Indian heritage, or you're Indian from the Caribbean. I was like, oh, okay. But prior to that, it was just like we're one and the same.
Yeah.
And there was no really there was no conversation around it. It just was.
Mhm.
I don't think we had conversation until post 9/11.
Yeah.
Um, and I think my first conversation was maybe 2002.
Mhm.
I had a conversation with my grandmother. Um, and we had talked kind of about like race, ethnicity, and the way that they were perceived. And um, yeah, that was a moment. Like, it was very jarring, very mind blowing, because you just kind of moving around a little colorblind.
Mhm.
I'm privileged in the fact that I just was able to access community and not think anything of it. I
Mhm.
thought, like, for me, white folks were the minority, it was mainly Black and brown people I was around. So I just grew up with like, I don't know, rich African American culture, or not culture, but like history,
Mhm.
where Black History Month was every month. Like we didn't have a set.
Like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, they could have been better with outside, like other ethnic groups. Like it would have been great to learn more about my Indian heritage or Latin heritage, but we did have Spanish classes growing up every year, and so I would learn a little bit. Um, but yeah, I don't think it was cognizant that I was different or my family was different until 9/11 happened, and now brown folks, and I'll just say brown folks because yes, it was Middle Eastern people, but at that time people thought Arabic and Indian was the same.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're just the same thing. Like
yeah,
everyone's a terrorist.
yeah.
So yeah, that was that moment where I was like, okay, 9/11 just happened. And I remember moments like cutting the lawn. My grandfather used to wear this hat, and then he would always put a rag on his head
Mhm.
and then put the hat on top, and it looked like this what the Saudis wear,
Mhm.
or like Kuwaitis with like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
plaid looking like head wrap. And so I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hope like nobody comes by and sees him and thinks something, they become prejudiced and think like, oh, this is one of those terrorist people. And it became a moment of being self-aware, in a negative way, of course. And that's when I kind of noticed that like, okay, being brown is making me a target. And
Mhm.
a target, and the world sees us as public enemy.
And to realize that when you're so young, like you must have been less than 10 to just be like, oh, am I bad? Am I wrong? When you're developing your own sense of identity. And I'm sure you were also going through so much personally at that time with your own identity and gender identity that everything must have just been coming at you from every single angle. And even now, like we have to be afraid of our families. Like we hear all the attacks on Asian American elders right now, which is just horrible. It sometimes feels like we haven't changed and we haven't learned at all. And I feel like at some point it gets really close to home. And that's when, especially I feel like the South Asian community starts to care when it like really affects them, when it gets that close to home. But all of these things are a sign that, you need to care about every single group well ahead of time, not until it just becomes your problem. And I think that's where we go wrong. And especially I feel like South Asian people have been criticized for this, is like we don't care until it affects us. And, a huge event like 9/11, that's when we had to like reflect and be like, oh wow, like this is like in our backyards now. Like this is about me and my family. And you said you were in New York until you were 10. Where did you move after that? And like how did that change things for you?
Yeah, so I was actually there till 13.
Oh, you were there till 13. Okay.
Yeah, so I completed middle school,
Mhm.
and I moved to Florida with my mother's parents. So after middle school, I had the opportunity to move in with my mother's parents. This happened because I had come out as gay and trans, and it just was a whirlwind of drama and mess within my household, and it just got really bad. I mean, my stepfather is Jamaican. My mother was just influenced heavily by Jamaican culture, and Jamaican culture, and I would probably say up to now is um, very misogynistic, very homophobic, transphobic, and very myopic when their views on things like gender, binary, and sexuality. It's just very skewed. Because of that, I was just going to war with my parents at home every day, and I was exploring my gender identity and getting more in tune with my feminine side, and it wasn't going over very well. So my mom and I were at war for a while, and we didn't talk. I mean, it got so bad that we lived in the same house and would not speak.
Mhm.
In order to talk to my mother, I had to correspond via email or my grandmother, who was in Florida. My grandmother would, or she would travel from Florida to New Jersey. My mother would call my grandmother, give her a message, and then my grandmother would call me and then give me the message. Like we weren't even talking.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, my mom would just complain to my grandmother because she knew my grandmother and I had a closer connection. Because my grandmother raised me for the first 2 years of my life, and then 13 on to 26. And yeah, so that's kind of how we did that. And then when it came time for high school, my grandmother approached me with the opportunity to leave um, to live with her and my grandfather. And I took that opportunity. And so I moved to Polk County, Florida, where I started high school.
Wow. And was your grandmother kind of like the person you turned to? Was she more accepting, you'd say, than your mom was, and that's why you felt comfortable moving? Or was that really like,
Yeah. My grandmother was like my mother, like she always felt like my mother.
Mhm.
We always had a really close bond, and she always treated me like um she treated me like her child instead of her grandchild.
Mhm.
Part of me, I don't know why I should have got my tissues. I always get emotional talking about my grandparents.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, she always said like I was like her fifth child instead of a grandchild, you know, and she always looked out for me. Like she was the person that I don't know, she was like my keeper. She was like,
Mhm.
you know, always looking out for me, making sure everything was fine. Um, and she was one of those people that always kind of feared, sorry.
No, it's okay. I hope we're not like,
Oh
go.
my gosh, no, it's
Yeah.
fine. I get emotional talking about her just in general.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, she was always like afraid of like what would happen when she passed. And she's
Mhm.
like, oh, I just want to make sure you're in a good place because I know that, you know, my mom and I have come a long way and we have a better relationship now, but she was just always really concerned as to like what would happen to me because she felt like if she left it up to the family, I'd be out on the cold. Like I'd be out in the cold. I would be homeless. Like they would just let me live under a bridge somewhere. Like, you know, and she was just like, no one really advocates for me the way that she does, the way my grandmother does. So we had a really close bond. And yeah, I felt a lot closer with my grandmother, but at the same time, my grandmother had recently converted over to Christianity,
Mhm.
and she started to kind of like she seemed very open-minded prior to getting involved in the Christian religion. And she was born and raised Catholic, but growing up, I don't think she like adhered to it heavily. I think I might have gone to a mass with her like once. But she wasn't a huge like Catholic person or religious person. So my grandmother and I, we used to like on the weekends get together. We would go to this place called Seatown. They changed it to Frambria. It was in Queens Village, I think. And our thing was like we go to KFC on the weekends, eat fried chicken. This is when I was eating meat. I've since stopped. But and we used to get blue crabs, and we would come back to the apartment, and she or like it was a duplex we were in, and the house would smell of pepper because we put Scotch bonnet pepper and habanero in the pot and boil the crab and make spicy. Oh, it was so good. And she would make curry crab. And that was our weekly thing. Every weekend we would get together, we go shopping, and we would pick crabs and we make curry crab and we would watch figure skating.
Mhm.
And that was our bonding. And my grandmother and I would watch figure skating and I loved it. She loved it. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, and I knew that it was a little bit more feminine to be a figure skater. And I would see men figure skating, and I would want to be a figure skater as a kid too. And my grandmother always accepted that from me.
Mhm.
But, I also was very feminine growing up. And my mother wanted a daughter. She has one now. She has two now. She adopted my little sister when I was 12.
Mhm.
But my grand my yeah, my mother wanted a daughter. Her friends would make fun of her when I was growing up and say, "Oh, you already have one, like that's your daughter." Because I was always so feminine and I was so tiny and I was mistaken for a girl. And my mom named me after her friend's daughter. So it was just like she wanted a girl so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was always mistaken for a girl growing up, and people just always thought, it was a girl until puberty hit. And so with all of this being said, I thought my grandmother was just like all on board, she's cool. And she was cool. But when I moved in with her at 13, everything kind of changed. And I thought she was cool, but now with the religion, she had a different idea of these feminine things. And um, she became a little bit more strict within like the binary and
Mhm.
wanting me to adhere to boy things, male identity. And so, yeah, that presented its own set of challenges that I kind of had to endure once I moved there. I thought, like, okay, the hardship is over, but it was just beginning.
Yeah, and I think it really breaks my heart to hear that because she was like the person you could turn to and you put so much trust in her and you were so young. Like anytime I hear you speak, that's what always strikes me was you were like a baby and you were so young and you really needed her there and she was there for a lot of it, but I like it sounds like the move and like the, converting to this religion and just adhering to it in such a stringent way changed all of that. And when you moved to Florida, were you able to find a community or were you kind of isolated now that you were with your grandparents? Like, what was that like? Did you have your own friend circle or somewhere that you could like kind of turn to?
Yeah, so it was very isolating. Um, when I moved out there, this is 2002,
Mhm.
post 9/11. Um, starting, a 13-year-old in ninth grade, they enrolled me in the high school for the church that they belonged to. So
Mhm.
this church basically owned half of the town that we lived in.
Mhm.
They had K through 12 school. They had a college. They had a big adult church, a senior living center, a bookstore, radio station, a Spanish church, and then they had the K through 12 church. And they were major sponsors for a lot of organizations, and like they basically own half of the town. So my grandparents enrolled me in the high school, and they had hopes that I'd do great and I'd be in private school and getting great Christian education with fundamental values and all of these things. Um, yeah, no, it was just yeah, it was a mess. I enrolled in school, um, and I started August, and then I think by October, the kids started like picking on me and picking up on my feminine ways and energy. And I was a minority. I mean, one, the only LGBT person in the school. But two, I was the only South Asian in my class, in my grade, in ninth grade. And the only one of three Black kids in ninth grade. And the only other South Asian person, well, actually, no, it was only three Black kids in the whole high school. I was one of three. because there weren't any other Black people in the other classes, I think. And then there was one other South Asian who was a senior when I was a freshman, and
Mhm.
I think she ended up becoming the valedictorian that year. Go figure, South Asians win. Um, but yeah, that was really it. So it was just like, being around, like going from New York, right, where I'm surrounded by Black and brown kids,
Yeah.
and white people are the minority. And now I'm here in Florida and I'm the minority, and I'm surrounded by like white kids and like, Latinx folks. And there's like 3 Black kids and like 2 South Asians in the whole high school and 3 Black kids in the whole high school. Um, so yeah, that was totally different type of realm to be in. And then the kids picking on me, they would call me queer at the time. We hadn't reclaimed the word. So queer had a very negative connotation. The kids would pick on me and they would write queer in my, they would get post-it notes, write queer on there, slap it on my back, yell out queer in class. They would write queer on my locker, break into the locker, write queer all over my books. I mean, they just terrorized me. And they were fighting to get me kicked out of school. I had one person every day would be just like, at least I'm going to be here next week. At least I'm going to be here next week. And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? And I found out what that meant one day. They called me into the principal's office and I walk in and my grandparents are sitting there, bloodshot eyes. And this has just been the pinnacle of so many just like incidents dealing with them, getting called to the principal's office because someone yelled out that I had on makeup when I didn't have on makeup. The principal makes me get a brown paper towel and wipe my face. And I'm just like, this paper towel is the color of my skin. The only stain that you see on here is the excessive
Mhm.
oily acne skin that I have. There's no makeup. Um, and so that was really frustrating having to deal with that. And then being enrolled into Bible study classes, or like I had to do Bible counseling. And then the last straw was finally getting to them. And so I remember just seeing my grandmother sitting there just like heartbroken. And it was so hard to like see my grandmother, like this strong woman. I'd never seen her cry
Yeah.
before. And she's just crying her eyes out. Her eyes are like bloodshot red. And I'm just like, what is going on? And they informed me, they have to withdraw me from the school because they would rather for me to leave than for parents to take their kids out of school because they don't want their kids going to school with a queer.
This is just, it's literally heartbreaking. And I am so sorry. And I keep coming back to the fact that you were so young. We've all been 13 and 14. We know how much it's just awful. And children are so cruel. And honestly, that cruelty is learned from the parents, and the fact that they would rather take this out on you than telling their children to be accepting, to be honestly all the things that a lot of religions preach, but people
Yeah.
don't practice conveniently, is sickening, and it's horrible, and also probably impacted your own education and your own ability to focus and excel in school. I think you've mentioned before that you were like a writer and you did poetry and you wrote and all of that, and the fact that you weren't able to explore that because you had to be watching your back constantly because of all this is horrible. And I think for most South Asian people, at the very least, the thing that they can relate to is the fact that it shouldn't affect your education. None of this.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that, for a lot of people is their ticket out of a lot of situations and gives them hope. Like, okay, like there could be a time when I can get to a place that's better for me. And you're not even allowed to focus on that. And it's just heartbreaking. And during all of this, how did you keep the hope? Like, how did you stay true to yourself? Like, did you have any pockets of like peace and just places where you could be yourself at all, even if that was like in your own company? What were you kind of doing to like get through and just keep it going. Because that type of resilience to learn it so young is also just so formative. And yeah.
Yeah, I just had to adapt. Yeah, I once they withdrew me from the school, I just remember packing up all my stuff into one box and getting in the car, sitting in that back seat in that old green Ford and driving back to my grandparents' house. And tensions were high. You know, they removed me from school, but they enrolled me into their homeschool program.
Mhm.
They also enrolled me into conversion therapy. So I just lost all my credits from the first semester, and I have to complete my full freshman year in one semester.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And now I'm going through this homeschooling program. I'm by myself. It's just my grandparents and I, and 1 acre of land. Um, no friends, no community, because there were only 3 houses in the neighborhood. We had a dog, we had chickens, and we used to have a goat, but the goat was no more. She had passed from a penicillin allergy. But it was very isolating, and all I had was my education and my mind. So, you know, this is 2002.
Mhm.
Um, didn't have a cell phone. I'm 13 years old, no cell phone. Calling my friends in New York was long distance. I didn't have money to, call them. So I couldn't talk with my friends. Internet was dial up. And so you had to be on the internet or on the phone, but you couldn't do both. So I had to choose those times wisely. And my internet usage was very limited. So it was very isolating. And what I would do was just kind of get lost in the future in my head and kind of like imagine what I would be like when I got my freedom, when I was an adult, when I had access to creating a life for myself outside of, the life that I've been living. Um, and I wanted to be free again. I'm from New York. Like I'm used to walking around and getting somewhere. I tried walking one time um on foot, and I think it took me 2 hours to get somewhere, and I'm used to walking 15-30 minutes to go shopping at the Coliseum at Jamaica Avenue, and I'm used to taking the bus and I'm used to taking the train and getting a dollar van and just having access, and didn't have those things in Florida. So it was really tough having to be independent, having to lose my independence and be dependent on other people.
Mhm.
Um, and then being in a household that just, um, you know, reeked of just the resentment. My grandparents resented me kind of for getting withdrawn from school, going through conversion therapy. My grandfather, I remember when we got home, he said, um, they were the only Black and brown couple in the whole county.
Oh,
Mind you, this county, yeah, this county is the largest county in Florida. And they were the only Black and brown couple. And they went to this church and they worked really hard for their reputation and to, be taken seriously and be received by the church. And my grandfather was just like, this is the church we go to. This is our community. Basically, like, don't mess this up for us. Like, what are people going to think about us? Like, you're doing all this stuff and getting kicked out of school. My grandmother would just kind of be like, you don't know what you're about. Like, I don't know. She just resented me for ruining her dreams for me. Like, here I was supposed to be this high achiever, going to the school, doing great. And, I didn't even last a full semester and I'm home being homeschooled. And so it was really tough just kind of dealing with that day to day and feeling like a failure and being depressed and wanting to get out, go back home. Um, and then home wasn't an option for me either. Like my mother wouldn't allow me to come back to New York. So I had to deal with being in Florida. And yeah, I would just like listen to music. I would be in my head. I'd write novels. I would do poetry. I just like delved deep into my imagination and just came up with a life outside of the one that I was living because it was really bleak, and I went through like a 3-year depression during my homeschooling years.
I not even imagine what that must have been like. And the fact that I wish you didn't have to be that resilient. I wish you didn't have to have been that strong. But the fact that you literally were like, I'm just going to create a whole other life for myself where I'm like fully myself, where I'm like accepted, where this is like possible for me. And I think the rest of your story really shows that like you made the moves to like have the life that you wanted, to like explore, to like get out of there. But to just, not be able to enjoy your childhood and like not be able to enjoy like high school because that is like a one-time experience. And listen, if you peaked in high school, so sorry. But honestly, you only get to do high school, school, those types of things one time. And the fact that you couldn't do it like as yourself, as like the person that you are is unfair and just horrible. And I think another thing is that in the early 2000s, like you said, you couldn't find a community online. Like now, at least, if you're, being bullied in school or you just don't have people like you, you can go online and safely find, friends and create a community. Like some of my closest friends are because someone decided to DM me on Instagram and then we got to talking and now this person is like my real life friend. But those options, those like alternative spaces were not available during that time. So truly you were self-reliant and you had to like dig deep inside yourself and create this other world for yourself. And when were you able to like leave this environment and how did your life like start and go from there into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah. So I homeschooled for 3 years, and then my last year I went to public school. So I went to a public high school. And I think that's kind of where things started to take a shift. Thankfully, my aunt at the time really advocated for me to have a social life because outside of like seeing my cousins and like my family for like holidays or, whenever they would randomly kind of visit, I didn't have interaction with people outside of my grandparents unless it was like the summer when I went to visit my parents. Um, so that last year of high school kind of shaped things for me, and I just got involved with everything under the sun. I was in National Honor Society, debate team. I was a cheerleader, tried out for baseball. I did tennis. I did advanced chorus. Whatever was available, I did it. And I would stay out every day until the moon was out. And I loved it. Like I would leave, the sun was coming up or it was still dark depending on daylight savings. And I would come home when it was dark. And that was my Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, if I had a tournament or a competition or whatever, I was out and I had friends and I loved it.
Mhm.
And, I was outed there too. These kids decided to be jerks and pay this guy to see if I was gay and whatever things came out. But um, I used to sing on my voicemail, and the kids who were making fun of me, they used to call my phone and harass me. And one day, I get a voicemail with no ring, and I hear one of the guys singing the song I was singing on the voicemail. And I was singing Ashley Simpson's Boyfriend. I'm mortified. I'm like, oh my gosh, they found out. So what they would do is call me and they would request songs. They were like, okay, sing the song for me. And I would sit there and I sing. And then eventually, like, and these were all the jocks. So these were like the popular kids in school. So they would have their section in the cafeteria and it would be with all the jocks, dated the cheerleaders. So one day they called me over to the table and they're like, hey, sing for me, sing for my girlfriend. So I'm singing for this, her name was Angelique. And I remember she looked at me and she was just like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, you have such a beautiful voice." This was the first time I stopped crying all day. And she was just having a really tough day. And she was like, "Wow, your voice really moved me." And that was kind of how things shifted for me. And
Mhm.
I found out, I mean, I just love to sing, but I didn't know how powerful my voice was. And because of that freak incident, I ended up becoming popular throughout the school. Like, everybody knew me for singing. They knew me as the artistic one. So they would call on me on class, and like the teachers would call me up and make me sing for the class. And then I joined the advanced chorus. And from there, I got to go sing at Candlelight Processional with John Stamos and at Epcot and Disney.
Oh
Yeah,
my goodness, John Stamos.
yeah,
Still a heartthrob. Still a
yes.
heartthrob.
Still love Uncle Jesse. But yeah, I somehow was able to make lemonade out of those lemons, or make nimble pani. Um, and, and so, it was incredible. So I went through that whole ordeal, went into college where I started. So once I graduated high school, I started transitioning first socially, and then I started looking around to see how I can get hormones, because I wanted hormones so bad. I knew it was time for me to transition. And so tried 3 different doctors. All 3 of them turned me away, said, "I'm not giving you hormones." And that led me to the black market. So I started self-medicating, and I was taking black market hormones for the first at least 4 years of my transition, because I mean, they didn't have an LGBT center, and they definitely didn't know what trans was. There wasn't any type of gay straight alliance. I ended up starting the first one at my college, but there was nothing in place for community, and these doctors knew nothing about transition.
Okay.
We didn't even have openly gay people, so they were just looking at me like, "What are you talking about? You want hormones?" Um,
What a massive gap in a medical education. Like, what? Are you serious?
they had no idea what that was, and the last doctor, she was my primary care physician. She was just like, "I give female hormones to women who have menopause. I'm not giving hormones to a 16-year-old boy." She's like, "Maybe you can go to Tampa or Miami where they do that there." And she left the conversation there. And there was no referral. There was nothing. So I was just, okay, well, I guess I just got to figure it out on my own. And I did. It led me to the black market. Thankfully, I'm still here. I didn't take anything that, gave me adverse reactions or, took my life. Um, Everything I learned about hormones and care, I learned through the internet, and I would just follow other people's regimens and hope for the best. And thankfully, nothing bad happened. But once I was under doctor's care and getting blood work and checking my levels, I was over medicating, taking way too much estrogen. Thankfully, it didn't create any major problems, but um, I was just kind of figuring it out on my own, and I couldn't afford to see a doctor at the time, and I couldn't afford to get legal hormones because everything was out of pocket. And um, a doctor's visit was like $300, $100 per visit. Yeah, 300 for the initial, $100 per visit. For my estrogen, the injection, it was $600 for the name brand, and that was like a 5-week supply. Um, and if I wanted the generic, it was $200 out of pocket. And every 2 weeks, I was paying $200. I mean, not every 2 weeks, every 5 weeks, I was paying $200, just for my estrogen. And so it just was really expensive, and it was really tough to just fork this out. And I was going to school full time and working full time in Florida, minimum wage. Minimum wage at the time was like 6.67. I think the most I made during my time there was maybe like 8.50 an hour.
Mhm.
And so paying out of pocket was really tough for me. But I had to advocate for myself. And I ended up doing this work because of all the things I'd been through.
Mhm.
I, got to a point where I ran away from home. I had to make a hard decision to leave my home because I just felt like a prisoner. And they found out I was transitioning. They shaved my head balls. They forced me to wear boy clothes. Um, and then they forced me to go to church and they forced me to get into the religion. And I knew it wasn't for me. I didn't feel comfortable. I just remember growing up, like I would sit at church every Sunday and just be ostracized. Like the kids would not talk to me. They wouldn't share their Bible with me. They wouldn't sit next to me when they were passing the offering tithe. They would just like pinch their thumb and finger and hand it to me
Mhm.
as if I had leprosy, if there was like something contagious I was going to give to them. And I just hated it. I was like, why am I putting myself through this? And I used to fake being sick. And then I got to a point where I was like, I'm not even going to fake being sick. I'm just not going because I'm tired of like being treated like this. Like, and why am I putting myself through this every Sunday? This is not fun. I don't enjoy it. I literally sit in silence from the time I go to the time I come home. No one wants me there. Why am I here? New kids will come and like the older kids would sit there and tell the new kids about me so that they wouldn't like talk to me or sit next to me. And I just like hated it. And so fast forward as an adult going through transition, I'm like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like I don't want nothing to do with this church, this religion, these people. And when I was forced to go back into it, I was just like, I can't. And there was this usher that met me the first time they forced me to start going back. I had a hijab on because I felt uncomfortable without any covering. And my grandmother told me I can no longer go to church with a hijab. I have to go without it. And the first time he saw me, he said, "Hey there, pretty young lady." The second time he saw me without the hijab, he didn't say anything. And then the fourth week, I was forced to get a haircut. And he saw me and gave me this firm handshake and said, "Hey there, young man." And that just made my skin boil. And I just was like, I gotta go. I have to go. And so, yeah, I had a really good friend. She was in Tallahassee at the time, which is 5 hours north. And I called her and I said, "Look, I don't know what to do, but I can't stay here anymore." And she said, "Okay, we'll devise a plan." She was going to London to meet with her fiance for a little bit. And she said she'll be back at this time. I think it's like May. And so I devised a plan with her to leave. I had to escape. And I had to do it very meticulously. So what I did was sign up for summer school. And I signed up for the first block, summer A. And I planned my escape to leave during summer B, that block. And I had maybe like a week or two window period because my grandmother had left for New Jersey. So it's just my grandfather and I, and he was very lenient. And I knew the way I planned it, I could escape as long as she didn't come. She
Mhm.
wasn't there. So I planned it so that she'd still be in Jersey when I made that escape. And so I sold all of my school books. I had a credit card for $500. I had the cash in my pocket from my school books. I packed everything into 2 suitcases. One of my friends picked me up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I left. I had my acceptance letter from Florida State University, which I sent to my mother and my grandmother and my grandfather, and I let them know I had been accepted into Florida State and I was leaving. I told my best friend, I was leaving, and for the longest, it didn't really register with her. She kept asking me, like, "Oh, what classes are you taking for summer B?" And I'm just like, "There's no summer B for me. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's do or die. Either I get on this Greyhound to go to Tallahassee, or I get in a hearse to be put 6 feet under the ground." But I was literally ready to end my life if I didn't get out. And because of my friend Erica in Tallahassee, I'm still here. She saved my life. And that's kind of when the change happened. And so after that, things started slowly change. I had a conversation with my grandmother and she was just like, "What's going on? When are you coming back?" I'm like, "I'm not coming back." And we had this heart to heart. And I told her I was suicidal. I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to continue living like this. And she broke down and started crying. I started crying, and she finally understood like all of the trauma that was put upon me, especially from what I was dealing with within the home and my family. And then fast forward, so this is 2008, 8 years later, 2016, a whole lot of a whole lot had happened. But at this time, I just ended my engagement. I was engaged to a guy, a Gujarati guy. Um, and that was a really powerful thing for me because he met my grandparents he was one of, I think, a few guys, but one of two boyfriends that had met my grandparents, and I had gotten blessings from them, and they loved him. Um, but I'd ended the engagement with him. We had a lot of stuff going on. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
Um, the Pulse nightclub shooting happened in Orlando, and that's where I met my roommate, my now roommate. We've been friends for 11 years. We met at Pulse 11 years ago. Two of my good girlfriends had passed away from silicone injections, black market silicone. And, we just had the election, and it just was a lot going on. And
Yeah.
I came to visit Florida. I came to visit California for the first time. And I'd been working for MAC Cosmetics, and I just fell in love with California. And I just knew this was going to be home for me. I told myself I'm going to move by New Year's. And I moved here in December of that year, like 2 weeks before New Year's. And so I kind of claimed it. Like it was like law of attraction. I
Yeah.
told my roommate I wanted to move, and my roommate was like, oh, let's do it. And we
Yeah.
just packed everything up and drove cross country. So the center, I got involved with the center because at that time, it was 10 years into my transition, and I felt like I'd be remiss to not have given back after I'd gone through all of this stuff, 10 years of knowledge and transition and hardship. Um, and so I called the center, and I spoke to the coordinator at the time, and we got connected, and I started getting involved. Um, and then from there, I was volunteering for a year, and then the coordinator had just graduated with their master's, and they were getting a job with the state, and they wanted me for their position. And now here I am.
Now here you are. And honestly, the way you tell your story is, I feel like, both heartbreaking and also just a testament to your resilience and the work that you're doing now. I don't know how else to say this other than the fact that I hope that like future generations and like young people who are going through this do not have to be as resilient as you are, because that is just way too much for one person to go through. And yet you are here, and thankfully you are here, and you are impacting the lives of so many people through your work. And I wanted to ask you, in the work that you do, what do you feel are the issues that really disproportionately affect either South Asian, trans folks, or just trans folks in general? What are the issues that really just you're like, this is a outsized burden on this community?
Yeah, I would say healthcare disparities.
Mhm.
It's like a huge thing. We need to get to a place where we have affirming providers. We need to get to a place where we have inclusive healthcare. And I mean, the state of California is ahead of the curve, right? There's New York, there's California, but even in the state of California,
Mhm.
insurance, having, providers, I think every provider should be trained on LGBTQ care, especially trans affirming care. Primary care providers should be able to provide hormone replacement therapy. This shouldn't be a huge ordeal where you
Mhm.
have to see a specialist, and, people act like you're an alien with two heads if you say you want hormones. Um, yeah, so there's so much in the community, but employment is a huge thing for the trans community. Getting folks access to work and, paying them livable wages, um, having access to healthcare, insurance, and then just like fairness, equality, or equity, you know, being in equitable spaces, and truly um, being wanted, you know?
Yeah. And just open, welcoming, and just this is not like the thing that fully should define you or, I think disbar you from getting those opportunities. That's incredibly regressive and unfair. So, how can people who are listening to this support the work that you and your colleagues are doing at the center? Would it be volunteering time? Would it be monetarily? What's the best way to help?
Yeah. If you'd like to get involved, you can reach out to us via our website. It's lgbtqcenteroc.org.
Mhm.
And there is a tab there to get involved. So if you like to volunteer, you can.
Mhm.
There's also a donation area. So if you would like to donate, we would love that. And, you know, we work really hard to serve this community. And so we we love just collaboration. So if
Mhm.
there are folks that want to get involved and give back, you know, we implore you all to volunteer your time and if you have resources, definitely donate.
So if people are involved in like an industry that you feel like would be beneficial, like whether through their company or something, they should get involved and just give
Yeah.
those resources out as well. And then briefly, I have like two last questions for you because we're a little bit over time, but I do want to know what is a project or something that you've worked on that makes you so proud of the work you've done and just, I think, does justice to everything you've been through?
Um, Say that one more time. Sorry about
Just like
that.
a project you're really proud of where you're like, this gives me hope. This like, puts together all the pieces in my life and all the things that I've had to go through in a way that just like makes sense and makes me proud and hopeful.
I would say like all of the trans events that we've been able to put together, and I've been honored to assist with the trans events since 2017. But everything from Trans Pride, just like the workshops and the glam closet, seeing people have access to like affirming clothes, and
Yeah.
we did an event called Motor Pride, which was awesome, and just like having a self-care day for trans folks and having access to just affirming knowledge, education as far as like professionalism and clothes and fashion and hair. Friendsgiving is an amazing event where we feed the community. 2019, we did 400 people
Wow.
we were able to feed 400 people. Last year, we did 300 meals. We did a contactless drive-through Thanksgiving dinner for the community, and we were able to feed people that were displaced, living on the streets, provide them hygiene kits. So that event is just always really beautiful. Trans Day Visibility, where we just like honor the visibility of transness and just the beauty of it, the resilience of it. We did a Vogue ball in 2019, which was
Wow.
so much fun.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That is.
um, yeah. And then Trans Day of Remembrance. And it's, I mean, not a celebratory moment necessarily, but it is a space where we can really honor those that we've lost, and we hold space for the people that we've lost each year. So that's another space be to be in and be involved in, because I also help others collaborate on their Trans Day of Remembrance events.
Mhm.
But it's very special to be able to honor those that are no longer with us.
Your list of events and the work you've done is incredibly long. And I'm sure we have truly just scratched the surface because you are impacting, like with each event, exponentially, you're impacting people's lives. And if you're watching the stream, audience, go donate, go volunteer something. Please check out their website. Like, this is incredible work. And this is like life-changing work for a community that so desperately deserves to live the life that they want to live and be accepted and honored. Um, and my final question, I don't want to make you a spokesperson for this community, but with your own experiences of being South Asian, of being mixed race, for people watching who, you know, maybe think like, I don't know anyone like that in my life, but might have someone in their family who is too scared to speak to them to know that they're accepted. What do you feel like is a way that they can make themselves like just like a more welcoming presence in that person's life and like a resource that this person can lean on in the South Asian community?
Yeah. So we have a Trans 101 event that we do once. Uh, we do it once a month. It's called Trans Orientation.
Mhm.
And actually, I'm doing one tomorrow. So yeah, so we have that.
If we can, if you wouldn't mind sending it to me, if there's like signups are still open or anything.
Yeah, they can just email me directly and I can sign them up. So yeah, we do that once a month. So this one will be on the 20th tomorrow,
Mhm.
from 10 till 12:30.
Mhm.
And yeah, so just look out for that. That's a really great informative way to kind of get involved and kind of understand what's going on. If you are supporting somebody who's trans or in transition, we have a group called Trans Community Allies Together, TCATS.
Mhm.
That meets the first Sunday of every month. We also have a therapy-led group on Tuesdays and Thursdays for trans allies.
Mhm.
Um, and then we have a South Asian group that's been on hiatus, but I would love to get that up and going. So if there's any folks that want to come together as a LGBTQ affirming collective, I did start that group because I was very passionate about holding space for the South Asian community. And because of that group, I was able to find other people. So we did have a beautiful group going. But it's been on hiatus since COVID. Um, and so we do have that in place as well. And I'm also in connection with a group called Satrang. And Satrang is the oldest LGBTQ South Asian organization in Southern California. And they're based out of Los Angeles. And so that's another space if you're looking for LGBTQ inclusive South Asian space
Mhm.
in the Southern California area.
Mhm. Okay, amazing. I think like the biggest thing that I'm hearing is like educate yourself, like understand the language and like use that language so that people understand that they can come to you and that you are like creating a safe space for them and they can turn to you in their time of need and if they need someone to lean on. And y'all, Google is free. Literally educate yourself. We have no time for people who are backwards. Like literally educate yourself, do your Googles, do your Googles. Like Miliana and her team are here to educate you all, but take the onus off of them a little bit, Google something, and then come to those sessions with like more advanced questions rather than the super basic stuff so that you can really make use of their time. And again, I just want to thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story. There were times where I was really emotional and we got to connect before this, and I'm just so blown away by you. And I hope that you get to continue to do the work and get to bring so much more awareness to the work that you're doing. And just thank you for everything that you're doing because you are affecting people in just the biggest way possible. So thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to say finally that we haven't covered that to close out with?
Yeah, I just want to say a major thank you. This has been amazing. And just open your minds, open your minds, open your hearts. You have no idea some of the battles that people are going through. And sometimes they just need a listening ear. Yeah, so open your mind, open your hearts. If you have someone in your family that is LGBTQ, or maybe they have a friend or a loved one, I wish, although things worked out the way they were supposed to, during the time of dealing with all of the madness with my ex-fiance and his non-accepting family, I wish they had that moment of just like, well, let's be open-minded here and see who this person he's so in love with, he wants to marry. So yeah, my hope and goal is to get to an inclusive South Asian community where we just see each other as people and that there's no barrier. We take down the caste, the creed, the color, the religion, gender, sexuality. We just are people and we can love and live freely.
I hope we can get there sooner rather than later as well. Thank you so much again. And to close out, a huge thank you to Sahas for Cause and also Bharat FM for providing us this platform to have this type of open and honest conversation. And also Sahas for Cause, you can email them, reach out to them, go to their website. They are providing a ton of COVID assistance and relief for members of the South Asian community, regardless of how you identify, regardless of your background. They are a super inclusive organization. So if you are in need of COVID assistance, please do reach out to them and you will find like a safe space and a wonderful group of people who are willing to help. And I will leave Miliana's information and everything in the description as well so that you can reach out to her, donate to the center, volunteer your time, attend these workshops, and hopefully get that South Asian group started again. That would be, I think, really amazing. So yeah, thank you so much. And we will see you again next time.
Thank you.
Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, welcome and adab. You are listening to Bharat FM, a one-of-its-kind, multilingual, eclectic provider of entertainment, information and news to Indian Americans. Headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, Bharat FM airs shows out of Cincinnati, Chicago and Phoenix. We take pleasure in our ability to cater to your bhakti, chusti, sfurti, shakti and masti needs with our audio and visual shows. Check out bharatfm.com for our online program schedule and archives. I'm sure the content will definitely tickle your senses. Tune in via the 24-hour web streaming on bharatfm.com or via the Bharat FM app. More information can be procured at 513-488-5070.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.